allow you to record my
Good morning
speech.
to the
That's what
distinguished
it is saying.
professors and participants. I am Dr. Shabalingappa,
No, sir.
Associate Professor and Head, Department of Management Studies, VTU Center for Postgraduate Studies, Kalburgi. I am the program host of today's events. A warm welcome to one and all present in the day 5 of 1 week online faculty development program on exemplary practices in teaching, learning, and evaluation of courses in computer science and information technology. This FDP is a sangam of Vishweshwaraya Technological University's Center for Postgraduate Studies, Kalburgi, and Indian Institute of Information Technology, Allahabad. I request all the participants to mute their audio. Wish you a joyful learning for the sessions ahead. Now I request Dr. Shubhangi DC, Program Coordinator, Department of CSE, VTU Kalburgi. Over to you, madam.
Unmute, madam.
Thank you, sir. Good morning to all. I am honored to introduce today's eminent professor, distinguished speaker of exemplary session, Professor Y.N. Shrikant, sir, and the presiding chair, Professor B.M. Subbaraya. Professor Y.N. Shrikant, sir, received his BE in electronics from Bangalore University and ME and PhD in computer science from the Computer Science and Automation Department of Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. Sir joined the CSA department as an assistant professor in 1987 and he served as a chairman of CSA during 2002-2005. Sir is also currently Dean of the Faculty of Engineering at IISc. His area of interest are compiler designing and programming languages. His most recent publications is a book on distributed graph analytics published in May 2020 by Springer. On the behalf of VTU IIIT Allahabad, thank you, sir, for accepting our invitation as a distinguished speaker for exemplary section. Thank you, sir. It's my honor to introduce presiding chair of today's session, eminent professor, Professor B.M. Subbaraya. Sir served as a Vice President, Dean, and Head of Global Education Center, Infosys Limited, an organization which is committed to education and has the world's largest corporate university housed in the Mysore. Sir has more than 35 years of experience both in academic corporate education. Sir holds PhD degree in CSE from IIT Delhi. As a dean, he has been instrumental in the development of educational governance, learning strategies, assessment methodologies, and leveraging technologies for the training graduate student. He has pioneered many innovation in education solutions like Genome model for assessment, a new approach for learning assurance, a self-assessment, and instant feedback mechanism. He has been responsible for talent transformation of more than 100,000 fresh graduates at Infosys and associated with GEC from its inception. Motivating and talented dean, driven to inspire the graduate students to pursue the professional and personal excellence. Sir is consistently striving to create the challenging and engaging learning environment in which students become lifelong scholars and learners. Dr. Subbaraya was a member of core team constituted by the chairman Infosys for nearly 2 years. Sir has been awarded by a patent system and method for automated and objective assessment of programming language code and a defensive publication on system method for detecting defect tracking in software project published by in ip.com in January 2011. His area of research is in software testing, in particular web performance testing. He is the author of a book entitled Integrated Approach of Web Performance Testing, a Practitioner Guide, IRM Press, USA. He has written a book chapter on the role of universities in leveraging the ICT for corporate education. He has published many papers both at national and international level. Sir was visiting adjunct professor at the College of Business, University of South Florida, USA for nearly 5 years. Currently, sir is working as a mentor to many IT organizations, particularly in the area of talent transformation. He is also helping many educational institutions to upgrade the students' skills for the better placement in the industry. He has trained more than 400 teachers from the various engineering colleges on skilling specific to technology. So, on the behalf of VTU Triple IT Allahabad, thank you, sir, for accepting our invitation as a presiding chair for today's exemplary session. Over to Shambhuling, sir.
Thank you, madam. Now I request the presiding chair, Professor B.M. Subraya, former Vice President, Dean and Head of Global Education Center, Infosys Limited, to take over the session. Over to you, sir.
Very good morning to all of you. Thank you, Shubhangiri, for introducing. And at the same time, thank you for giving this opportunity for the organizers. So once again, welcome to Professor Y.N. Srikanth, who is a distinguished professor. And definitely he's a very key person, especially in the area of compiler design and then programming languages. I was fortunate to hear and then discuss a lot during my PhD with Professor Anshul Kumar at IIT Delhi. And at the same time, in our industry also, we had an opportunity to debate, brainstorm with Y.N. Srikanth on various other aspects. So Professor Srikanth, of course, the distinguished teachers are really expecting on how to teach compiler, especially if it's a key subject, and at the same time, how to prepare the content. And at the same time, what are the probably critical examples probably we have to give just to motivate the students. And then finally, how probably the assessment can be done to motivate the students. So this is probably, it could be an expectation for the teachers participating here. So over to Professor Y.N. Srikanth. We are eagerly waiting for you to hear from you. Over to Professor Srikanth.
Good morning, everyone. Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. So now, before I turn it, on, I thought I would just ask everybody whether everything is okay. Okay, thank you. And let me. Okay. So, and thank you, Professor Nagbhushan and Professor Subraya and all other, dignitaries here today. I welcome you to this lecture that I'm going to give on teaching compiler design in the modern world. I hope I will be able to convey my, passion to teach compiler design the way I do. And I hope I can convince us that it should be taught appropriately so the students are motivated. Okay. So the first and foremost question that almost every one of our students, not only the Indian Institute of Science, but anywhere else would ask is, a compiler is already a well-studied subject. So why are we studying it at all? Why do we have to have, a compiler design course in our curriculum? Maybe a couple of researchers doing research on compiler design, that would be perfectly okay. But at the UG level and at the PG level, are there any reasons, solid reasons to study compiler design? This is very similar to the transition all of us have made from the age of vacuum tubes to transistors to integrated circuits and all that. So today's world, very few details of designing, emitter followers or RC coupled amplifiers with transistors are taught in colleges. There is the question that we want to address today. Okay, so let's see what the questions likely to be asked in a class would be. Aren't there very good compilers already? There is a, a fabulous GCC compiler. Then there is something called an LLVM framework for compilation. And there are many other commercial compilers available in the market. So is there anything to be learned by studying compiler design? Is it going to be a shell? In other words, compiler design techniques useful for only compiler design? Or is it that learning compiler design, it will be useful to, in many other subjects as well? So, well, we just use an existing compiler. We compile with GCC. It produces machine code. Why are we learning how to build one? And then there are very, very emphatic statements by students saying, nobody builds compilers from scratch nowadays. So why are you teaching all these to us, basics of compilers and so on? So I will try to answer as many questions out of these as possible today. Okay. So the first, we are not on the defensive. We want to emphasize that applications of compilers are almost everywhere. For example, if you look at HTML or any other language which is used in writing, descriptions for the web, the parsers for these languages, they are all languages. So we need to parse them. So at the heart of any HTML, heart of any web browser is a parser for HTML as well. And then there is JavaScript, there is Flash. So we need interpreters for such languages. So these are again going to be built based on compiler technology. Then now the hot topic for the next decade or more would be on automatic program verification. How do we say that a particular program is going to do what we want? So program analysis is at the foundation of all such verification efforts. And then software testing. I'm going to elaborate a little bit on this later. So there are lots of program analysis techniques which are applied in the area of software testing tools. Then when we come to program optimization, well, compilers nowadays do a very good job of reducing the time, making it very efficient. But suppose we have some special purpose compilers necessary, and we want to reduce the amount of power that the program takes. For example, when it runs on a small, microcontroller or in a phone. And what about memory? Are there program optimizations available for memory? Yes, a few, but there is a lot more to be done. Then an extremely interesting topic, malicious code detection. So, for example, every one of us would have met this object called malicious code, a virus or something like that, Trojan horse, whatever you call. And it could be on our laptop, it could be on our phone, anywhere else. So how to detect whether the code that we already are trying to run on our laptop or phone, how do we detect that it has some malicious code? How do we detect that it has a virus? Most of the tools which are available today, it could be from McAfee, it could be Semantic, whatever, they use a different technique. They use a dynamic technique for detection of malicious code. There are a large number of efforts which are going on to detect malicious code in programs by analyzing the program. These are called static analysis techniques. And then there is a big area of domain-specific languages, which is currently being explored by many people all over the world. So it is well known that writing a program for manipulation of, let us say, matrices, or manipulation of graphs, or manipulation of images is very hard. So if you try writing it in Java or C or C++, it's going to take a lot of time. So there are lots of efforts to design very special purpose, domain-specific languages. It could be for graph applications, it could be for image applications, or it could be for any other application. So when we build a domain-specific language, obviously nobody would have a compiler for it. You have to write your own compiler and then make it work in the machine. So these are some of the applications of compilers that are very important. So let's move on. Compilers are extremely complex, and they are beasts basically. So I can make a very emphatic statement here, and it's very difficult to contest it. Compiler is possibly the most complex system software that exists today on any machine, and writing it is a substantial exercise in software engineering. To give you a very simple example, the GCC compiler may have almost 1 million lines of code, C++ code or whatever. So obviously, even just managing it, applying changes to it, is a phenomenally difficult exercise, let alone writing a professional compiler of that size. It takes a large number of years to write a compiler and make it stable. So even understanding such compilers requires a fair amount of reading on compiler design before we try to make a change to it. So it's an extraordinarily large and complex exercise in software engineering. And people who love challenges should obviously study compiler design so that they are capable of making changes to such large software systems. Then, why is it that a compiler is so complex? To put it in a very simple one-line, explanation, it takes a programmer's requirements written in a programming language, and it is supposed to map it as efficiently as possible to the architectural details of the target machine that we use. So it's very simply, it is easier to state it than it is done, simpler to state than done. And the architectures may be very different, the languages may be very different, so the compilers obviously are very complex. So we are looking at a very high level specification, such as a programming language, and we are looking at a very low level target, such as a machine with machine details. It could have pipelining, it could have multi-cores, it could have very specific hardware, all that. Then the next reason why compilers are very complex is that it uses algorithms and techniques from a very large number of areas in computer science. I will give you a sample very soon so that people are convinced that it indeed happens. Then there is a intricate amount of theory in compilers, and this is probably one of the best examples which translates that hi-fi theory into practice and builds tools. So, and when you build tools from hi-fi theory, obviously you expect it to become very complex and all that. So that is the reason why, these are some of the reasons why compilers are extraordinarily complicated. Then I also said it takes a lot of effort to understand compiler design. Here are some examples. So it draws results from mathematical logic, lattice theory, linear algebra, probability, and so on. And all these results are applied in the modules of a compiler which perform type checking, static analysis, dependence analysis, loop parallelization, cache analysis, and so on and so forth. And then the compilers also make practical application of, these are some of the simpler things. What I said here were really hi-fi, but here are some of the simpler ones. Application of heuristic search, which is used in list scheduling and instruction scheduling and all that. Application of graph algorithms in register allocation. Application of finite automata in lexical analysis. Application of push-down automata in parsing. These are the small ones, and the list would be obviously much bigger than this. Okay, so I hope what I have told you in a nutshell kind of convinces you that compilers are very complicated, compilers technology should be used, should be learned so that it can be applied in many areas. The next questions that we need to address are, what exactly should be taught at the BTech level? What should be taught at MTech PhD level? Should we have theory and practice both? Obviously, definitely yes, and I will tell you why later. And generally, this is a very difficult course, so one has to have enough expertise by studying many subjects in order to be able to teach a compiler design course. So, what are the various fundamental topics that need to be taught in a course on compiler design? I am not actually listing the topics, assuming that everything will be taught in one course. We will see partitioning of these topics into courses a little later, but I am just putting down the fundamentals so that just to tell you that these are all very important in compiler design. So finite automata and regular expressions. This is something everybody understands very well. So these are two fundamental areas, topics which are essential in lexical analysis, which I will cover a little later. And then the next set of topics are from context-free grammars and push-down automata. Then people have to, teachers have to know good foundations of, rather teach good foundations of data structures. Not necessarily in a course on compilers, but they can come from elsewhere. Linked list, trees, searching, hashing, priority queues, balanced trees, graphs, dynamic programming, backtracking, string manipulation, tree pattern matching. Well, the list is much bigger than this. So these are all kind of very fundamental, topics which are necessary to understand compiler design. Then students also have to learn architecture and operating system concepts, not necessarily in the same course again, in different courses possibly, and then put them all into work in this course. For example, what is pipelining? How do threads operate? What exactly happens in multi-core programming? How is GPU programming different from multi-core programming? Is distributed execution, always beneficial? These are all questions which can be answered only by understanding the fundamentals of some of these concepts. Then, once students get into the course, definitely have familiarity, rather obtain familiarity with what is known as an LLVM framework. This is low-level virtual machine. This is a very famous framework that is used in compiler teaching and professional compiler design. Then, of course, the age-old tools of Lex, Yacc, Antler, etc., etc. Okay. Very briefly, I will touch some of these topics to just drive home the point of what exactly needs to be taught. So when we teach finite automata, regular expressions, and lexical analysis, even that we go into many details of the theorems of finite automata, regular expressions, or we try to explain how lexical analyzers work, and write how to write lexical analyzers by hand. No, the emphasis should always be on tool building, how to generate lexical analyzers automatically. That's to be the central question in teaching lexical analysis. It is never going to be, in great detail about how to write lexical analyzers by hand. So we must teach them how to program with the tool Lex. So how to do that? One could, for example, let us take the last bullet. One could design, the students could design a small language with novelty. For example, a matrix manipulation language, or a string manipulation language, or a graph manipulation language, manipulating fractions, complex numbers, whatever it is. It could be a small language for which the students are going to provide a design. The first of the compiler, the lexical analyzer could be written for this small domain-specific language, which has to choose their own languages. They could come up with their own design, no problem. So, and the second possibility of teaching lexical analysis very well is, of course, using Lex is one of them. Lexical analyzer in the LLVM framework could be changed to accommodate new language features. So you try to extend C by 1 or 2 constructs, etc., and then try to tell students, now see how you can compile such a program. Then something similar happens when we teach hexagram, push-down automata, and parsing techniques. So obviously, students must be taught both the top-down and bottom-up techniques. That's a very, very basic thing that they need to understand. But again, after that, it is not about explaining in great detail how to write a parser by hand, but it is automatic parser and tool building. And the emphasis is at the next level. It is like just tell them what a transistor is and then go on to integrated circuits and use them in the design. So we should be telling them about programming with Yacc, with ANTLR and LLVM. They should be taught how to write grammars for languages and possibly continue the same programming exercise that we already talked about, small languages, from the lexical analysis stage. Work with LLVM, and LLVM has fantastic features. It gives you facilities to generate what are known as abstract syntax trees given the grammar for the language itself. So once you have an abstract syntax tree, a lot of things could be done by implementing simple passes over the abstract syntax tree, and obtaining this experience gives them a firm footing in how to manipulate trees. That's a basic tool which possibly is useful in XML document manipulation and things of that kind. Then the phase of a compiler called semantic analysis is very important. Now, what it does is to check whether programming language rules are satisfied by the program. That's the simplest statement about semantic analysis. But then, is there anything new in learning semantic analysis? Fundamentals can be learned, attribute grammars and all that. But is that all? Not necessarily, because when we implement such domain-specific languages, okay, the domain-specific languages, for example, can be built over C or C++. So the semantics of C and C++ remain as they are. But then when we introduce extra data types, it could be, for example, a graph data type, it could be an image data type, it could be a matrix data type, whatever it is. Then we could introduce, special operations on such objects. And when we introduce special operations, there are going to be special, semantic checks necessary in permitting such operations to be carried out. That's exactly what I mean by analysis, type checking, etc. in domain-specific languages. And then the abstract syntax tree that is used in parsing continues to be useful in semantic analysis. And once that is over, it will be used to produce target machine code. Basically, when we produce target machine code or any other semantic analysis is to be carried out, we always formulate it as a set of passes over the abstract syntax tree. So this is the reason I was telling you in the previous slide that learning about abstract syntax trees, trying to get them from the LLVM, how to use them, how to generate them, how to manipulate them, these are all very fundamental skills which will be useful everywhere. And LLVM can be produced to, used to produce the abstract syntax tree. Then the next phase of a compiler is the machine code generation, right? So why is it that machine code generation techniques are useful elsewhere? For example, one may have to write an assembler for a new microprocessor. Well, that's very simple if you have understood how to generate machine code. Just-in-time compilation for Java, C#, these are always going to be, every time you have a new domain-specific language and you want to do just-in-time compilation for it, or change Java's just-in-time compilation to accommodate a new feature, you need to know how to work with just-in-time compilation. Then there is an area called binary translation. You are given code for a particular machine, and now you want to translate that machine code to run on a different machine, and the translation is in the binary form. So from Intel machines to some other machine, for example, right, ARM machine or vice versa. There is something, everybody would have heard of what is known as reverse compilation. You are given the machine code and you want to generate the source. So such things are very difficult and not necessarily unique. There are lots of difficulties in it, but the technology which is used is again that of compiler machine code generation technology. How to compile domain-specific languages to GPUs and multi-cores? This can be, the importance of this cannot be overemphasized, and we need to learn machine code generation techniques in order to see how to achieve these tasks. Again, let me underline this. A set of passes over the abstract syntax trees is the way to go in teaching any of these techniques. Then, a very simple example, of course, the graph manipulation language, we published a book, and that was also the topic of a PhD thesis of my student. So this graph manipulation language is called, Falcon, and it was designed on top of C. It supported graph types. It has supported graph input-output. We could simply very trivially iterate over the vertices or edges of a graph in parallel. There could be thousands of edges, thousands of vertices. Then we could work on different graphs in parallel. We could partition graphs very simply and then make them each partition run on a different core. Try to compute spanning trees in parallel. All this could have been done very, very easily. And of all this, the graph types are fundamental. When we have something like this, type checking for graph types becomes a very fundamental requirement in a compiler. So this is what I was talking about, semantic analysis in domain-specific languages. And then we also have, code generation for multi-core architectures, code generation for general purpose graphic processing units, and then distributed clusters. So our compiler, the one we have built, is available in public domain. So you just have to provide a switch like a GCC compiler. Then it generates code for multi-cores, it generates code for GPUs, it generates code for distributed clusters. So the basic idea is you write a single program and you don't worry about the kind of machine that you are talking about, rather compiling for. You just worry about your graphs and the algorithms on graphs independent of the machine on which they are going to run. And the compiler takes care of like a magic the code generation for GPU or distributed clusters. So that's exactly how this sort of a domain-specific language works. Okay. Now let me switch to a slightly different topic called program analysis, which is very fundamental to a compiler in optimizing the program itself. Okay, so the program analysis is a very fundamental module in a compiler, and it is useful for optimizing programs. So let me give you some examples, simple examples of other places where program analysis is useful apart from just a normal compiler. Well, I already talked about multi-core architectures and GPUs as target machines for a program. Then it is easier said than done. You either write an explicitly parallel program and manage all the parallelism available in a multi-core or in a GPU. So the programmer is going to have a lot of difficulty in doing all this. Or you must have a compiler which converts a sequential loop to a parallel loop. So when we want to convert a sequential loop to a parallel loop, there are lots of difficulties. First of all, is it permitted? Is it legal? Or when we convert it, it runs in an incorrect fashion. These are all things that need to be checked. And checking that involves what is known as dependence analysis. And once we do, in order to perform dependence analysis, you would have performed a fair amount of program analysis to determine what kind of information is necessary and so on and so forth. So this is one application which is very solid for the program analysis to convert sequential loops to parallel loops. Then programs have what are known as data races. So what exactly is a data race? Very simply put, if I am running a parallel program, it is possible that a small part of the program runs on one core, and another part of the program runs on a second core, a third part of the program runs on a third core. And all these are running in parallel simultaneously, and try to access the same memory variable in parallel. So there is something like A equal to B plus C, and all of them may be actually updating A. This is called a data race. So if A happens to be, when we write a sequence program, we update a variable only once. So the results are deterministic. But when we try to convert it into a parallel program, or we write a parallel program on our own, we could be making mistakes. And that's exactly how data races happen in programs. Now, this is a human error. It's not that it is a compiler error, but program analysis to determine if programs are data race free is a necessary requirement before we start running programs. So program analysis is an essential component here and is an application of that technology. The third application of program analysis, students learn program analysis in compiler design with one application known as optimization in mind. But what I'm trying to tell you is, once they learn this, they see how to apply it in so many other places. That's the idea. The third area which has applications of program analysis is program slicing. So program slicing, let me define what exactly is a program slice. It's a fairly simple object. If I take a program, consider a statement, A equal to B plus C or some other statement in that program, then I'm going to extract part of the program which affects this particular statement. So for example, if I have A equal to B plus C, then all the modifications which are done earlier in the program to B or C will all be relevant to this. So my program slice will contain all those statements which modify B or C in some respect. So that is very loosely what a program slice is. So program slices are very useful in software debugging, therefore testing and all that. So apply how to compute program slices again goes back to program analysis. So type checking of some runtime features at compile time. Very interesting, right? So type checking is basically static. In other words, if I have an array A and a sequence, an ordinary variable B, writing A equal to B is illegal in C. Everybody knows that. Or even B equal to A is illegal. And the compiler would check that and throw it out saying you're trying to assign a single value to a variable or a array variable to a single value and all that. But there are some features which are actually runtime features. An example, is a file read before it is open? Or is a file written into before it is open? Is an empty stack going to be popped? So in the program you are using a stack, you are going to push some things into the stack and pop things out of the stack. But then at some point the stack will become empty, hopefully, possibly. Then if there is a mistake in the program, it could be actually trying to pop from an empty stack. It would actually get into an error and the program stops. So trying to do some program analysis to check whether a file read before open or empty stack being popped at compile time is a very interesting question. Yes, it is possible. Very advanced type checkers, not the ones that we use in an ordinary compiler, but something much more advanced, now are being investigated. And I had a PhD student who worked on some aspects of this at some 3 years ago. So his compiler eventually would say that, yeah, you are trying to read a file before it is open. Yes, you may be actually popping a stack when it is empty. Such questions could be answered from doing this. So studying type checking in a compiler and then trying to read up on the advanced type checking options would help in getting an advanced compiler which makes it much more safer for a programmer to use. So that is the other one. Some more well-known examples of program analysis. For example, when the software engineering, everybody would have studied what is known as software testing. And there are many approaches to software testing. One of them is known as a data flow analysis approach to software testing. So examples are uncovering errors along all paths, dereferencing null pointers, buffer overflows, memory leaks. So these are all errors in a program which could be possibly detected using what is known as data flow analysis. And this is a topic which is taught in a compiler design course. Then we have what is known as a worst case execution time estimation. So for example, if you take a code which is running in a real-time environment, it is useful to know the worst case execution time of that program so that we could schedule it very efficiently. So but worst case execution time estimation is a very hard topic, not at all easy, and requires a fair amount of program analysis per se. So that is another area where program analysis can be used. Of course, program optimizations are the traditional ones in a compiler, and these are all well known. In the list is well known. It is not that there is something new here. These are all taught in a compiler course: converting virtual method calls to static method calls, clustering objects to reduce overheads of garbage collection, optimizations for multi-core, VLIW, GPU, etc. Optimizations for memory hierarchies. This is interesting. For example, when you have banks of memories in a program, right, and you are trying to do, let us say, power optimization. Now, one of the optimizations that is always attempted is to switch off a memory bank when it is not in use. So in other words, to do this, we will have to move variables to a particular bank. Say, for example, a loop is operating on an array. The entire array will have to be put into the same bank so that other banks can be switched off when the loop which is operating on this particular bank is running. So this is an example of optimization, data layout optimization for a particular type of architecture. Another applications, for example, design of so you develop a for example, you develop the instruction set of the architecture, then you develop a simulator for the architecture. Then you need a compiler so that you can run applications, convert applications, programs into the code of this particular new architecture, then run the simulation, get parameters out and all that. This is called a compiler in the loop hardware development. Every time you change the architecture, the compiler needs to be changed. So it's always a prototype compiler in that sense for that new development. Then there is hardware synthesis, VHDL to RTL. From a higher level description language, you will go to a lower level register transfer language. Then there is something called compiled simulation. This is something like inlining programs used to simulate designs written in VHDL. There is no interpretation of design. So these are all some other applications of compiler technology. But I think we have talked enough about what is compiler technology, why is it important, and so on. And I have also given a huge list of topics that can be included in a compiler design course. But what needs to be put where is the question. So for example, at the UG level, the basic things have to be taught: lexical analysis, parsing, semantic analysis, intermediate code generation, runtime storage. These are extraordinarily basic. They must be taught. But the emphasis should always be on using tools, and automatic program generation, tool building, etc. So we must encourage all the students to write programs using Lex, Yacc, and LLVM. Again, let me emphasize that they can be asked to design simple domain-specific languages. They can implement it by emitting intermediate code, could write an interpreter for the intermediate code. They could even emit C as the intermediate code by LLVM parsers, etc. In fact, it is even possible to divide the assignment into parts, and students could do it in different ways. So one of the groups could actually be emitting C code, another group could be emitting intermediate code, a third one could be writing an interpreter for that code, and so on and so forth. So it's possible to assign assignments of that kind. Then what goes into a PG? So at the PG, we assume that front-end design is known. Whether they have written a compiler, front-end, etc. is a different thing. It is not necessary that all that is already written and digested, but at least they must understand how exactly a front-end works. That is enough for the second level course at the PG level. And here, the emphasis is on teaching implementation of parallelism on GPUs, on multi-cores. How about automatic parallelization, program analysis, program optimizations? These are all the topics that must be emphasized at the PG level. And we must concentrate on LLVM again. We could design DSL with more features. We could have a parallel language. We could have dynamic binding in the language. We could have overloading of operators, etc., etc. And then the assignment will be very substantial. The students are going to implement a compiler, for this design domain-specific language. And then the students could be asked to read research papers on contemporary topics. They could present seminars. So this is what we normally do. One of the, there would be 2 theory, exams, which carry about 20-30% weightage total. And then there would be a large programming assignment, which carries about 40% weightage. And then the, seminar, etc. would carry about 15% weightage. So we generally sit through every one of these seminars one-on-one. The students present it in the class for about 1 hour. We listen to the student. Students are asked to provide feedback. They are asked to, pose questions to the speaker and all that. And then this participation, which everybody is aware of. Even for the projects, assignments, we really have to sit with the student, spend an hour, and we always tell the student, look, you have to tell us what you have done in various steps. In other words, after 1 month, they have to tell us how they have come up with the design of the domain-specific language. After another month, they have to tell us the preliminary design for the language, compilation. Third month, they really need to show all the features of the implementation and so on and so forth. So that's how we deal with the aspects. So that brings me to the end of my talk, and I would be very happy to take a lot of questions. This is a discussion forum. All of you are teachers, so it is not as if I'm teaching you as I would in a student class. So it is for discussion. So compiler technology has many applications. It's probably the most complex software, system software. It translates intricate theory into practice. And the bottom line is, teaching compiler design is not easy. Teacher must be well versed with Lex, Yacc, LLVM, GPUs, multi-cores, etc., etc. So thank you. The forum is open for discussion.
Sir.
Thank you, Professor. Now I request
Thank you.
Professor B.M. Subraya to take over the session and steer the Q&A section.
Yeah, thank you very much. Professor Srikanth has done a wonderful job. He has presented in depth what teachers are supposed to know about compilers and then how to teach. A couple of points really highlighted. So at the starting points, he mentioned about the purpose and the importance of the compiler. And at the same time, he touched upon automatic programming also. The domain-specific language which he mentioned, which he quoted, is really used in many industry applications. And all the teachers, my request is, if you are looking at, pushing your students to industry, probably domain-specific language, probably you may have to give a lot of importance to that. So the reason because the industry are using a lot of applications with respect to the domain-specific language. And at the same time, he highlighted about why the compiler teaching is really a complex one. It's really interesting. Teachers have to look into that. There are a lot of prerequisite courses are required. Probably could be finite automata theory, regular expressions, data structures, architecture. Probably, so when you are looking at regular expressions, etc., I suggest that is still even today it is worth. If you should read Nicholas Wirth, Pascal book at the same time, if you see the appendix, there's a production rule. How he has really articulated, it's worth looking at it. And at the same time, we mentioned that is why these prerequisites are required. And at the same time, we highlighted about the importance of YACC, ACK, ANTLER, LLVM, and then later on, he moved on to the semantic analysis of various programs, which is really important. So that is where the programming languages come into picture. Unless otherwise we understood the production rules, it's very difficult. I suggest that at this stage, teachers should read even a fundamental book, and which is written by Bentley, The Programming Pearls. It's really worth reading. So kindly do that. At the same time, our Dijkstra is the first paper, The Humble Programmer. So if you do the Google search, you will get a lot of information on that. That is where I feel that is professor has highlighted semantic analysis. Machine code generation is really important. And at the same time, his personal research on graph manipulation languages, it's worth exploring. So the teachers, I feel that is, if you're looking at probably an advanced courses, probably you must look into that. And finally, he mentioned about the software testing. My distinguished teachers, software testing is really important. At the same time, if you understood the foundations of compiler, data flow analysis especially, and the scripting. So today the test automation is the is really rolling in industry. Automation testing means again there, so there is a definite programming language. You have to script it, you have to compile it, and then you have to run, you have to execute it. It is a separate domain altogether. The compiler, the foundation on compiler is really required for that. So by and large, I feel that is this course professor's presentation is full of deep content. Each and every slide is worth exploring further by all the teachers, and then coming out with a good content before going to the class. I feel that it is teaching compiler, it's not so easy, because finally he mentioned about the hardware description languages and then the PHDLL. That is really important. Of course, we computer science teachers, we don't appreciate much on that. So we don't touch upon those, and it is worth required to touch upon HDL and VHDL, especially at the PG level. So by and large, the session went on well, and then full of content. And I feel that is my request to all the teachers, you please collaborate yourself and then create a good content, and then how to teach this course, please elaborate that and then go and then teach. That is what my impression about this session. At the same time, going forward, the requirement for the teachers and sponsors. Thank you very much. I am just handing over the session to Professor Shubhangini to take it to the logical end. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I personally thanks to Professor Srikanth sir for the excellent and thought-provoking session on the compiler design. So we have received a few queries, sir, in the chat box. So one of the queries is from Professor Prakash Hiremat, sir. With your kind permission, I'll go ahead, sir. So sir has asked, please give some information on natural language parser and difficulties with such a task.
Okay. See, natural language processing is, an entirely different technology. Very low. Grammar which you need a different completely different doing that. I'm afraid will not help you in doing anything related to natural. So that's outside the domain of compilers per se. It is just that concepts of grammars and languages are common, but beyond that the comparison ends there.
Thank you, sir. Sir, one more question is there from Professor Pushpa Rani. So ma'am has asked, she need to know that according to the compiler designer, what is the role of comparison of algorithms and passes taken place?
No, I didn't understand. What is the question?
Sir, question is, she need to know
Comparison
that according to the compiler design, what is the role of comparison of algorithms and passes taken place?
Comparison of algorithms. Well, I think you might as well ask her to explain a little more what do you mean by comparison of algorithms.
I'll pass that
comparison of algorithms for parsing. Yeah.
I'll pass that query to you, sir.
Comparison.
Offline. Yes, sir. Sir, one more query is there. So whenever we call a method, sometimes the compiler resolves the type of its parameters at compile time, but in some other cases it couldn't be, and it resolves them at runtime. Sir, what do you think? Is compiler time type checking is better or runtime type checking is better, sir? Which will be better?
See, it is not a question of better. It's actually a question of whether it can do it at all. For example, in languages such as JavaScript, right? There is no type assigned to a variable at all. A variable could be an integer at this moment, and after a while it could become a character. A third time it could become an array. Fourth time it could become a structure. So in such cases, when a set of parameters is passed to a method, it is impossible to do the type checking of these parameters at compile time. Language have type checking. Languages types attached to the variables such as C, C++, etc. The compile time type checking is possible and it is always done. So the answer is yes, it is always faster and better and more efficient to do compile time type checking. But in languages with dynamic binding, it is not possible to do the type checking at compile time, and it has to be done only at runtime.
Thank you, sir. Last question. If one is interested in compiler technology and wants to develop his own perfect language, what is the best way to teach them the process step by step?
See, let me explain the way I understand the question. You are asking whether how to develop a language which is excellent, perfect for teaching compiler design. Is that interpretation reasonable?
Yes, sir.
If we assume it's reasonable, there is nothing like perfect. It is always better to let the students design their own language, very small for their own, the way they want. Let them, fancy design languages, but we may be able to reduce language to a smaller language so that they can definitely not trivial. So it's okay to let the students fly high. Let them learn languages, but then we can bring it back to lower levels and ask them to implement it. That is the way I would say students should be advised.
Thank you, sir. Over to Professor Shambhulingappa, sir. Thank you, sir. Yes, yes.
I will
Please, sir, continue.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Professor Srikanth.
I
Professor
have an idea to
Surya,
restrict
for stating the session.
the student.
Now with this, we have completed. Srikanth sir, do you want to say something? Srikanth sir.
Have
I think he is trying to get
flexibility.
connected. So let's wait.
I have finished.
Hello, Professor Srikanth.
Yes, hello, sir. How are I have finished my lecture, and if Q&A is over, you could continue with what you propose to. No problem.
Thank you, sir. With this, we have finished the session, first session of last day. We are breaking, and we'll come back to the second session, which will start at 11:30 a.m. Thank you for joining the session, and I
Thank you very
request all
much.
the participants to join the session at 11:30 a.m. Thank you very much.
Thank you
Thank
very
you for
much.
in my talk. Bye bye. I
Thank you,
send an
Srikanth.
email. If you have
Thank
any,
you,
you
Surya.
can send me an email.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to everybody. And it's wonderful to lectures like this. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir.